CAN International Press Briefing. Climate Action Network International is a network of over 700 member organizations from 95 countries. Like I said, this is the last day, so the last regularly scheduled briefing, but we'll look forward to addressing you as talks progress throughout the day. This is webcast on the UN website if people don't get enough of us right now. Today on our panel, I'm happy to welcome Eldon Meyer from the Union of Concerned Scientists. He will be taking on the ambitious task of distilling down some of the key decisions that we need to watch for over the coming hours. Harjeet Singh from Action Aid International, who's going to focus in on the status of negotiations related to finance. And finally, Jason Anderson of WWF Europe, who's going to be giving us some insight into Europe's credibility in advancing a positive outcome. So I'll pass it to Eldon first.
Thank you very much. I'm Eldon Meyer, Director of Strategy and Policy for the Union of Concerned Scientists in the United States. We look at these negotiations not as how many decisions can be made or how much paper can be issued, but can we save the planet? And the clear litmus test here is what will give us the best fighting chance of staying well under the 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase that world leaders agreed to 2 years ago in Copenhagen. We see 4 central elements of that fight. First of all, we need to see continuation of the Kyoto Protocol, the only legally binding instrument we have to get emissions reductions, which is with as many developed countries as possible, maintaining commitments post-2012, and with the loopholes that threaten environmental integrity, such as carryover of the so-called hot air tons and land use change and forestry loopholes being eliminated or at the best, at least minimized. Secondly, we need a Durban roadmap with a clear process and timeline to negotiate a more comprehensive legally binding treaty that will include major emitters such as my country, the United States, China, India, and others. And we want that done no later than 2015. Third, we need an aggressive work plan starting next year to close the so-called ambition gap between the 2-degree target and the pledges that countries have already put on the table. You've seen reports from the International Energy Agency, the United Nations Environment Program, and others that have clearly indicated there is a large gap between commitments and pledges on the table now and having a fighting chance of staying under 2 degrees. And finally, we need a process and timetable to ramp up climate finance to help developing countries deploy clean technologies, reduce deforestation, and adapt to the mounting impacts of climate change. We need signals that that is going to ramp up towards the $100 billion a year by 2020 that was put on the table by my President Obama and other world leaders from developed countries in Copenhagen 2 years ago. I will talk a bit about the state of play on the first 3. Harjeet is going to talk about finance. You all saw, I think, Minister Hedegaard's press conference and the release of the joint statement by the European Union, the small island states, the least developed countries. I think that is a significant development in this process. It's the creation and the unveiling of the so-called Green Group that it took to get the mandate for Kyoto to be negotiated in 1995. We've never seen progress in these negotiations unless there is a progressive coalition of developed and developing country leaders who want action. Usually that has involved the European Union on the developed country side and the small island states, LDCs, and other progressive developing countries on their side. Minister Hedegaard indicated she saw a positive movement from South Africa and Brazil over the course of the night in the closed Indabas, and that now she is focusing on trying to get the U.S., China, and India on board on that process. And she also made very clear that they are not changing their position unless they get some process leading forward to a legally binding instrument that covers the major countries that the EU will be forced to not put an amendable, ratifiable set of amendments for the KP on the table here. On the ambition work plan, this has been tasked to the New Zealand minister to lead as part of heading up the overall package of mitigation elements on the developed and developing countryside. We need to see much more ambition in the ambition package. Because focus as we will on the KP, the Kyoto Protocol, and a broader legally binding agreement, those are not going to do much to start to reduce emissions beyond what's already on the table before the end of the decade. And we need to close that gap. So we need a real work plan with pledges being requested, with high-level ministerial engagement, with analysis, with putting the fire under countries, both developed and developing countries, to lift our level of ambition, and also to look at sectors that aren't covered now, like HFCs and international aviation and maritime emissions. And all that is possible in the next year if there is political will. So we will be looking to see what the state of play on that is over the course of the day. My understanding is that was not one of the big foci of the discussions last night in the Indaba. That's at the ministerial level, being led by, as I said, by the New Zealand minister. So we hope to find out more about that today. And now I'll turn it over to Harjit to give you an update on the